For a long time, right, we've known that cancer has something to do with our genes. But what if I told you that the most famous cancer genes we all hear about were actually kind of a distraction? That they were hiding a much, much bigger secret? Well, today, we're going to uncover a massive genetic mystery and the revolutionary tool that finally cracked the whole thing wide open.
I mean, it's a question that's probably crossed your mind, right? Especially if cancer runs in your family. Is it written in my DNA? And for years, the honest answer from science was, well, incomplete. They knew genetics was a part of it, for sure. But it felt like they were staring at this massive, frustrating puzzle, with most of the pieces just gone.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Our story really kicks off with this giant scientific headache, a huge, gaping hole in our understanding of why cancer risk gets passed down through families.
You know, we've all heard it, maybe even seen it in our own lives. Cancer just seems to run in the family. And it's not just a feeling. The data totally backs this up. If a close relative, like a parent or a sibling, has had a common cancer, your own risk can shoot up, sometimes doubling or even tripling. So the evidence was crystal clear. Something genetic was being inherited.
And this is where the real problem starts. On one hand, you've got the famous cancer genes, right, like BRCA1. Think of these as genetic sledgehammers. They're rare, but if you have one, they can dramatically increase your risk of cancer. But here's the huge mystery. These sledgehammers, they only explained a tiny piece of the puzzle, just a fraction of the inherited risk we were seeing in families.
Let's put a number on that, because it's pretty wild. For breast cancer, those well-known genes like BRCA1 and BRCA2, they account for less than a quarter of the extra risk we see in families. So, yeah, for breast cancer and a lot of other cancers too, a massive chunk of the genetic story was just missing. And that, right there, became the big question. If it's not just a few big, bad genes causing all this risk for most people, then what is it? Where is it hiding? This whole mystery got a name, the missing heritability problem. And trying to solve it was about to force scientists to look at our DNA in a totally new way. So to find this missing code, scientists knew they needed a brand new tool. They needed a way to search the entire human genome for clues, not just shining a flashlight on the few genes they already suspected. And that's when the hero of our story arrives on the scene, the genome-wide association study, or as everyone calls it, GWAS. You can think of it like a completely unbiased detective. Instead of just going after the usual suspects, this approach is agnostic. It scans our entire genetic code, looking for any clue absolutely anywhere, with no preconceived notions at all.
So here's the best way to think about it. Imagine you have two massive crowds of people. One crowd has a specific cancer, the other doesn't. A GWAS is basically a giant high-tech game of spot the difference played with their DNA. It scans everything to find those tiny little spelling variations that just happen to show up more often in the group with cancer.
Okay, so how does it actually work? Well, it pretty much boils down to 4 steps. Step 1, you collect DNA from thousands of patients and thousands of healthy people. Step 2, you scan all of their genomes for hundreds of thousands of really common genetic variations. You can think of them as single-letter typos in our DNA code, and they're called SNPs. Step 3, you use some powerful statistics to compare how often each one of those SNPs shows up in the cancer group versus the healthy group. And finally, step 4, you pinpoint which SNPs are way more common in the folks with the disease. And boom, those are your genetic hotspots.
And this is what you get at the end. It's called a Manhattan plot. And you can probably see why. Each one of those dots is a genetic variation, a SNP. And the higher a dot shoots up, forming one of those skyscrapers, the stronger its connection is to the cancer. It's this incredible city skyline that was basically the treasure map that led scientists right to the missing code. All right, so scientists have this amazing new map. What did these massive genome scans actually find? Well, the answer turned everything we thought we knew about cancer genetics completely on its head. Because here's the thing. The big reveal wasn't finding more of those sledgehammer genes like BRCA1. Nope. The real answer to that whole missing heritability problem was something way, way more subtle. It turned out it wasn't one big faulty gene. Instead, the answer was more like risk by 1,000 tiny paper cuts. These GWAS studies uncovered hundreds of common genetic variants, and each one, all by itself, only nudges your risk up by a tiny, tiny amount. But when you inherit a whole bunch of them together, their combined effect really starts to add up.
This idea has a name. It's called polygenic inheritance, and it's totally different from those rare, big-hitter mutations. These little risk variants are actually super common in the population. In fact, most of us are walking around with a bunch of them. Like I said, any single one might only raise your risk by a tiny bit, but the more of them you happen to have, the higher your overall genetic risk score goes.
And the scale of this is just staggering. Thanks to this GWAS method, scientists have now found more than 450 of these small effect genetic variants for common cancers. They finally found a huge chunk of that missing heritability they'd been looking for.
But what's really wild is that this idea wasn't totally out of the blue. Way back in 1974, a researcher named D.E. Anderson was looking at how risk was passed down in families, and he actually suggested it might be a polygenic mechanism, lots of genes with small effects all working together.
Now, he didn't have the tools to prove it, of course. He couldn't see the specific genes involved. But his gut feeling about the whole pattern of inheritance, it was absolutely spot on. It just took us decades and this amazing modern tech like GWAS to finally find the actual variants and prove that he was right all along. For most of us, our inherited cancer risk is polygenic.
Okay, so the mystery is solved. That's great for science. But what does it actually mean for you and me? I mean, how does knowing about hundreds of these tiny risks actually help us fight cancer in the real world?
Well, it leads directly to this really powerful new tool, the polygenic risk score, or PRS for short. What a PRS does is it takes all of those tiny effect variants we found, looks at which ones you have, and basically adds them all up to give you one single personalized score for your inherited risk of a disease.
Just look at this example for colorectal cancer. This really shows you the power of a PRS. If you're in the top 10% of the population based on your score, your risk is already almost double the average. And if you're in the top 1%, your risk is nearly 3 times higher. All of a sudden, we can find people who have a genetic risk that's just as high as someone with one of those rare sledgehammer genes, but their risk was totally invisible to us before this.
And this is the real game changer. It means we can finally start moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to preventing cancer. Instead of telling everyone the exact same thing, we can start to personalize prevention. We can tailor screening schedules and strategies based on a person's unique genetic blueprint. The potential here is just so exciting. Imagine if your personal genetic score could tell you, hey, you should start getting colonoscopies at 40, not 50. Or what if it could help your doctor decide if a specific preventative medication is right for you? Or even help guide your treatment if, heaven forbid, you did get sick. This is the future. This is the promise of personalized prevention.
And that really brings us to the final big idea here. For so long, our genetic code was basically a black box. But now, by solving this huge mystery of the missing heritability, we have this incredible new tool that could completely reshape how we think about our health. We can move from just reacting to disease to being proactive, to personalizing prevention. So the question isn't really if our DNA holds the keys anymore. The real question is, how are we going to use them?